This is a W3C standard that covers a few different technologies: HTML templates, decorators, custom elements, shadow DOM, and HTML imports. So HTML templates are just what they would appear to be, just a template tag, which has its own shadow DOM inside of there. Decorators will apply templates via CSS to other CSS selectors. This is still very experimental, so this has not been implemented yet in anything. Custom elements, kind of self-explanatory, where you make your own HTML elements. The shadow DOM, which is true encapsulation of the DOM, is a document fragment. Examples of this are like input type of date, things that we haven't had prior access to as developers. Unless you were developing for the browser directly, we now have access to do it and create our own. HTML imports, which is pulling in external HTML files, in this case for web components, so you can just use them inside of your application. So I recommend going to this working draft and the technology drafts that are underneath W3C. There's a few different projects that fill in the gaps for browsers. Currently you have support for almost full support in Chrome Canary for this natively, and also partial support in Firefox Aurora, and that's pretty much it. But you can still build things today with these technologies by using projects like Polymer and Xtags, which fill in the gaps for evergreen browsers. So IE10, WebKit browsers, most of the new browsers will be evergreen. So that said, xtags.org is Mozilla's project. Very great project. I recommend going to their GitHub page because a lot of that stuff is not documented on here. They have really good repos underneath the Xtags dealing with different types of elements, and there's a registry there, so that's really encouraging. The code for this registry is actually on GitHub for us. So kudos to Mozilla. This is great stuff right here. So Xtags also they have another brick library which is built on Xtags, and this is for creating these components, and they have demos and the markup, and they're doing a really good job with this. The documentation and the demos is just fantastic. Today I'm going to be talking about Polymer. This is Google's project, and Xtags actually pulls in a lot of the Polymer polyfills that go underneath to fix the gaps with the other browsers. The guys at Google have been doing a really great job. If you go to their GitHub, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of different repositories that are being built with this. Stuff like, Polymer UI components, but also, stuff for doing Ajax and things that are not really visual, things that you kind of take for granted and wouldn't think to use, in HTML. So let's take a look at an example. I created a quick example with pure CSS and HTML, some CSS animation, just some, using backgrounds and color to create this. So I didn't want to have any JavaScript to really play around with. Wanted to use as minimal as possible. So if you look at this, I have this 3-pillar HTML element, and in my head, let's see, in my document head, I have the Polymer code. Okay, we won't look at that. But that's basically the polyfills and everything for Google. And I have this HTML import here. So let's take a look at that file. So if I go here and I inspect it, what does this mean? Okay. This is a Polymer element. Here is a template. And in that template we have our document fragment and the script. it's initializing this element here. So it looks for the name 3-pillar and just initializes it in Polymer. And you'll notice it's blank. And that's because templates don't get rendered when they're actually loaded into the browser. They get rendered when they're initialized. So initialization can happen in a few ways. The way I'm doing it here is just adding an HTML tag for it. And so that's how it works. So you might ask, why use this over Angular or some other framework? So Angular is great. It uses directives to create HTML elements that are custom. One of the things it doesn't have, though, is pure encapsulation. So CSS can go through that, and you can access the HTML through the DOM as normal. And there's this global space. Shadow DOM and templates enables us to be purely encapsulated, which means I can now just pull in people's HTML files, use those components, and not have to worry if I have jQuery or if I have some library or framework. It's totally encapsulated. It's self-sustaining, and it's not going to be obtrusive and not a lot of hacky JavaScript on top of things. So this is really, really fantastic. And the Shadow DOM is a very, very powerful piece of this. So that's basically web components in a nutshell.